Hello and welcome to a new episode of Business Pharaohs. Today, I have a very special guest. With me, a young entrepreneur who's helping revolutionize the healthcare industry, the CEO and co-founder of NERv Technology, Amr Abdelgawad. Welcome. I'm so happy to have you here today on Business Pharaohs.
Thank you, Samir, for having me today on your podcast. It's a pleasure.
Thanks.
I've known you for just a very short while, but during this period, I think I really enjoyed working with you and getting to know you.
No, same here, man. Same here. You've been doing great work, and it was always a pleasure for me to just try and get in there, get some of your knowledge, work with you side by side, and see like where the world will take us. So it's been great.
Hopefully, somewhere nice.
I always like starting the day with like saying, "Who is Amr Abdelgawad? Where did he start, and how did he get on the road of entrepreneurship?"
For sure. I'll give you a little bit of a quick rundown of my own history and background. So I was born and raised in Saudi Arabia. Spent the first 18 years of my life over there. And then I moved to the University of Waterloo to pursue my undergrad in nanotechnology engineering. That was back in 2011. While I was in undergrad, I met a really close friend of mine, Yusuf Hedwa. We worked together on a couple of projects. And then closer to his fourth year, while I was in my third year, or a year apart, he told me of a problem that he wanted to pursue as a full startup idea, which has now become NERv. That was exactly 6 years ago. Wow, time flies by. And we started working on it together. It was a very small idea. The idea originated from his mother, her pains and worries as a surgeon, where she would be concerned about patients post-operatively, not knowing if they're recovering well or if they might be suffering from a complication that everyone's blind to, which to us seemed like there was a gap in the way post-operative care was being dealt with.
Yeah.
How could we just sit down and wait and sort of passively see if a patient is suffering from a problem or not, and not trying to be proactive and figure out the problem from the get-go. So that's how the whole story originated. And as I just said, 6 years later, we're still working on it and we're getting one step closer to that dream.
Just for who's listening to us, Amr actually went to the same school that I went to, University of Waterloo. I remember the first day I met him was I was walking by out of the gym, and then I knew a guy he was walking with, and he was like, "Hey, this is Amr. Let's introduce you guys together." And then I saw Amr with his suit. I think he was wearing a suit the same day. Then I just met him, and then a year after that, I actually sent him a message that I wanted to work on NERv, and we met again, and then he accepted. So it's like I met him, I didn't meet him, and then I met him again after a long time.
I don't know if I should be really worried that you actually remember what I was wearing that day.
It was the first impression, right?
I guess.
Yeah. So you talked about a very different industry. Usually a lot of the people that come on here have online tech products. They have they do manufacturing. They're either big in their industries in Egypt, but you're, as an Egyptian in a different country, you started on a very hard industry. The healthcare industry takes so many years. A minimal amount of people goes into that industry because it's very risky. But you guys were very strong. You worked together, and then you, as you said, you just finished your 6th year of just building on NERv, starting 2014.
Yeah, exactly.
So, talk to us about like the journey of building that startup. A lot of people think of startups in a different way. Egypt, especially Egypt and the Middle East, they're starting to get into that startup world. They're starting to get into that startup structure, to go into incubators, to get help from external sources, to go through VCs, venture capitalists, seed funds. It's a very different world. So talk to us about the journey of just starting off. How do you build the idea? How you started building on that idea, and then you met with your champion surgeons or your the people who are helping you with your venture.
Yeah. Not gonna act like we were seasoned entrepreneurs and we knew what we were doing from the beginning. We actually Had to go through a number of pivots. We learned along the way exactly how things are supposed to be done, especially in such a regulated
Hmm.
industry where you're dealing with people's lives, and you have to be really careful about what you're developing and to make sure that you're developing something that is worthwhile. So when we first started off, we actually were focusing on the same problem, but with a different solution.
Hmm.
And what we maybe didn't realize back then is what is known as the product market fit. In your head, you might be thinking of a particular solution that you would think is a good fit for the problem that you're trying to tackle. But going out of the building, as they call it, when it comes to the lean startup method, and speaking to your customers and validating exactly what the problem is, and at the same
Hmm.
time trying to validate your solution without explicitly saying what your solution is,
Yeah.
was something that we had to learn the hard way. We spoke to a few surgeons when we first started off. One of them was Yusuf Smother, and they gave us some really good insight.
Hmm.
But as we started working on the solution, we started realizing that there are other stakeholders that are involved when it comes to regulations, when it comes to hospitals getting involved, when it comes to physicians who are eventually going to be the end users. You really need to understand exactly what each one of them wants.
Hmm.
Because if you miss out on that, you might actually have obstacles in the future that would prevent your solution from getting adopted.
Yeah.
So when we first started off, the idea was, and you might even know this, the idea was to work on a permanent implantable chip that was
Hmm.
designed to monitor patients post-operatively in order to identify leakage of gastric content. And as sexy as the idea sounded back then, it might not have been even feasible to get such a product to market with
Yeah.
just working on it through a startup. As you said, there are VCs involved, there's funding that's involved, there are investors who are expecting an ROI at some
Hmm.
point on their investment. And getting an implantable device regulated, approved, and in market would take a very long time,
Yeah.
which is something that we had to learn the hard way. So we went back to the drawing board, we went back to our surgeons, our advisory board, spoke to them, try to understand exactly how we take the same sensing technology that we have today and implement it in a way that can get adopted quickly by physicians so that
Hmm.
we don't change their workflow significantly, and at the same time get it approved through regulatory bodies quickly.
Hmm.
So we went through that pivot a couple of years ago, and I'm glad we did it. And I'm really glad we understood exactly how this industry works, because it would have taken us, yeah, it's honestly would have taken us a much longer time to get such a product to market. And I'm glad we went through that pivot, or else we might not be here today.
Yeah. If I would put an input about the timelines of the healthcare industry, because Amra and I were talking about the same thing like a couple of days ago, to just get a patent is, which is like your product out, and that no one copies it, takes around 5 years, just 5 years. To just go through the design process, it took them probably like 4 years before they went into the clinical trials or the animal trials. So the timelines are crazy. It's not like just starting an online business and going into the market like after a year. It actually takes a lot of patience and discipline to just start building on the product from the beginning to end. It's very consuming. So a very risk at the beginning, but with a very high reward later on.
Yeah, and even if you don't think about the reward in terms of a monetary reward, uh, like this is gonna sound too shady
Hmm.
for everyone, and it's gonna sound like as if it's something that everyone says and you go out and boast about it, but eventually, what really matters is saving people's lives and
Yeah.
having an impact on someone's life. And honestly, that's I have family members as well in the medical
Hmm.
industry, so I understand the struggles and I understand how difficult it could be sometimes to be dealing with patients and improving their lives and improving patient outcomes.
Hmm.
So at the end of the day, if we manage to deliver on a product that has a positive impact on someone's life
Hmm.
and might even save someone's life that was going to be lost because of a problem that could have been prevented from the beginning, then that's really the value in
Yeah.
what we're trying to deliver here.
That takes us to like exactly what I wanted to talk about next, which was where did that, because every entrepreneur, if especially in today's world, you always you need a passion in a specific field, in a specific industry that will make you stand out. You just talked about it. It's the passion for the healthcare industry in general. How did that passion grow? I want to root that in a lot of the entrepreneurs in today's world, especially in the Middle East, to tell them, okay, go after your passion and not just a regular industry that you don't care as much about, because it's going to make a big difference later on when to see like the more passion you have, the harder you're going to work, and the more you're going to focus on the product or the business you're working on. So where did that passion come from?
So I guess the passion was inside of me all that time. I just didn't realize it until it came out while working on NERv. So I have two parents. One is an engineer, the other is a doctor.
Yeah.
And growing up, I could always see what my mom would do at work, but I was very close to my dad, and I was very close to his line of work that I knew from the beginning that I wanted to be an engineer.
Yeah.
Part of me, I guess, was still involved on that medical side, and even one of my teachers in high school was really pushing me to go into medicine.
Yeah.
And I was so stubborn back then, and I was like, no, all I want is to go into engineering. And at some point, I even remember my mom telling me that I can see you. My mom, both, and my mom and my teacher would be telling me, I can see you wearing. You look like a physician. Like you have that attitude of a physician. And I'd be like, no, I want to be an engineer. But when Yusuf told me of the problem, and he told me of sometimes the worries that patients, their families, physicians have as they go through such a difficult time going through a surgery and not knowing what the outcomes could be, and that we can have a solution that can help alleviate some of those pains and worries. That's when it triggered a part of me that, that's what I need to be doing.
Dr. Amr coming
in. I guess, and part of me maybe wanted to be a doctor all along, and I might not have been able to study medicine or go through that process and get a degree, but I am still involved in the industry, and hopefully I can deliver on something that adds value.
Amazing. It's truly amazing to just I love it when I see someone that's been growing at a very steady rate, mashallah, over the past years, that when you start at a point, you never know where that point's going to take you. You always find new things within yourself. Just like you said, okay, I was always not wanting to be a doctor or in the healthcare industry in general. And then you suddenly, it just came in front of you, and Yusuf, who's a very nice guy, just said, okay, this is what I have. What do you think about it? Let's join and create this business and help save lives. So no, it's crazy. And I always say that to the people listening, go after your passion, and step by step, your goal in life is going to appear. It's not going to appear suddenly. Just be patient, and you're going to see that it's just going to take you to where you need to be. Just be patient about it and keep working hard.
And if I can slightly build on what you're talking about when it comes to passion, doing a startup is obviously hard, and I think everyone realizes that. And you're going to face so many obstacles along the way that if you don't have that passion, the first obstacle you hit, it might actually break you down. And if it's not for that passion, sometimes you wouldn't be able to pick yourself back up again and try to tackle the problem and see it through. So passion plays a really big role in seeing a startup become a success and hopefully become a scale up and eventually become a company that's known in the industry.
So we talked about yourself. We talked about a little bit about entrepreneurship, which is usually how I like setting it up. Do an intro, starting to get into the professional career, and then start getting to the nitty gritty details of how do you strategize? How do you build that? So next we have the technical business section, as I say it. So what was the setup of NERv, or of your entrepreneurial experience? So how did you start? You said Yusuf started reaching out to you to create the team. How did you guys set it up, and what were the problems faced along the way?
Oh, that's a very loaded question, and we can probably talk about this for quite a while. But I guess one of the most important things that you mentioned early on is the team. You need to have a really strong foundation to be able to build any startup from. And that foundation is usually the core team.
Mm-hmm.
You want to make sure that the people that you're working with are people that you're comfortable working with, and at the same time have complementary skill sets.
Yeah.
You don't want. So one important thing to consider while building that strong foundation, which is your business, is to have a strong team, a strong founding team that can help deliver on what you're working on. And that foundation has to be built by having complementary skill sets. So if you have team members who are technically adept, you also need to make sure that you have people on the team who understand business fundamentals
Mm-hmm.
to be able to take this product to market. Once
Yeah.
again, I'm not going to act as if I'm a business savvy person or a seasoned entrepreneur, but these things we just had to learn along the way. And we had to adapt to try to see who's the best fit to get into each
Mm-hmm.
department, if you want to think about it that way, and lead that department so that we have a strong team.
Yeah.
Now, beyond building the team, you're obviously going to face many challenges. One of those challenges, if I may speak specifically to the medical industry, is that you're going to have to you will probably get a lot of pushback when it comes to your solution. If you're
Mm-hmm.
trying to change physicians' workflow or the way that they're used and trained to doing certain things, you
Mm-hmm.
might start by getting some of that pushback early on.
Mm-hmm.
And you just have to keep on pushing through if you really believe in the value that you're trying to deliver on. But at the same time, you also have to keep an open eye and keep your ears wide open to listen to
Mm-hmm.
what some of those physicians are telling you. Because these people are eventually going to be the end users. These people are going to be the ones who buy your product or
Mm-hmm.
ask to buy for your product. So you need to make sure that you're delivering and developing something that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
That you're building a new business idea from scratch. Every problem that every startup faces is obviously funding.
Yeah.
And that's usually a struggle to begin with. However, right now, I think we're probably in a time where we're lucky that startup funding is becoming more and more available.
Yeah.
And entrepreneurs before us who have led the way and sort of paved the path towards making people understand what startups are and what the value that these startups can bring helped put enough funding out there so that you can start and begin and grow your startup. And that on its own, we can obviously sit down and talk about it for hours. But typically, if you want to look at what that roadmap looks like for startup funding, you usually begin with some grants and non-dilutive funding opportunities that can help support the research, especially if you're a deep tech startup. And then you go out and try to raise some more money from friends, families, and angels. Then you go to the early pre-seed rounds where you can work with some accelerators who take a certain amount of equity from your company to provide you with some funding. And then you move on to the VC world and hopefully grow your company from there. So it's a roadmap that you have to go through, and you probably will have to go through at some point.
So
But
before we continue, let us hit a couple of meanings for the people listening, because a lot of people still don't understand what an accelerator is, what a VC is. They're like, we hear them a lot sometimes, but they're not necessarily well known to the general public. So what are those two things? So we understand, okay, the grants are just from the government and just maybe funding from family and friends. And then you said the accelerator. What are those?
Yep. So accelerators usually have mentors and ex-CEOs of companies or ex-CEOs of startups who decided to give back to the startup world. So they would get some funding and they would run a program. That program can be anywhere from a few weeks to a few months, where they bring you in, they give you some funding to run your startup while taking a certain percentage in that company. And they work with you hand in hand in the first and early stages, whether it be on the product development side, customer validation and discovery, scale up so that you can get into the market. So that's what an accelerator program is.
It's
They provide you
usually
with
an early
resources,
phase.
they provide you with mentorship and guidance. It's an early phase. Yeah, it's usually, for most startups, I'd say it's even before you get to market.
Okay. And then we go to the venture capitalists.
Yes. So venture capitalists are people who understand, I guess, more of the finance side a little bit better, and they try to provide you with even more funding. So VCs usually would come in, if we want to focus on the medical device industry at least, they would come in when a company is just about to be commercial. Given that they have a specific timeline that they need to return their money to their LPs at, they would usually have to come at a point in time where they expect the company to generate a sufficient amount of returns so that they would be able to deliver to their LPs. And VCs, when they come in, they usually come in with bigger checks, and they also come in with their network. And at this point, this is when the company really starts to scale and grow. There's a lot of math that goes into how VCs run their funds. That's also a separate topic that I'd be happy to discuss at another time.
So basically, if we set it up, you start funding the idea, and then you start funding the foundations of the actual business with the accelerators, or not specifically funding, but you start building the foundations. And then when you reach the VC route, you're actually trying to scale up. You're starting to go to market at the best price as possible. So yeah,
exactly.
It's been very smooth. Every topic that I wanted to talk about has been going in the exact same order, and so it's just crazy. Now we're gonna touch point a little bit on just in general the healthcare industry. How just a short time just to talk about the healthcare industry. What are patents and how can you actually get in there and be successful?
So if you want to talk about the healthcare industry in general, when it comes to the startup world, at least, it can be divided into different sections.
Yeah.
So you've got your medical devices, which is the space that we're in. You've got your healthcare IT, which is another space, digital healthcare, and software solutions that can be used with both hospitals as well as patients. So you have to really figure out who your consumer is and who you're selling to, which is an important part of identifying who your customer base and what your market would look like. And finally, the biotech space. So the biotech is more focused on pharma, molecular diagnostic products. And these are all separate industries and they all function in different ways. So you need to understand exactly which space you're in and what you're trying to develop. Now, to patents, I'll try to be brief here because this is an area that we can also talk about for quite some time. But when you're developing a new technology and before going out to the market and talking about it, you want to make sure that whatever you're developing is protected. And in order to do so, there's usually multiple steps in that process. And you have to make sure that you're working with the right people as well along the way, so that you'd be developing your patents and have a strong IP portfolio that will guarantee that you're protected right now. And if you're in a space like the medical device industry where acquisitions are very common, you have to make sure that you have that strong IP portfolio to make you a hot acquisition target. Now, when you first start off, you obviously will be doing a lot of changes when it comes to your product. So the way patents work, that you work on what is known as a provisional, which gives you protection and a priority date on your technology that is being developed, while allowing you to go out to speak about it openly without being afraid that someone might steal your idea. In that year of the provisional's lifetime, you can actually make changes to what you're developing. You can change what your claim structure is, which is really the fundamental pieces of what your patent is all about. Now, once that year comes to an end, you have to decide where you want to protect this technology. And in order to do so, you need to file for a regional patent. So let's say, for example, you want to protect your technology in the US because you're going to be selling in the US and you're going to be manufacturing in China, for example. At this point, what you want to do is that you want to file a regional patent in both the United States and in China to make sure that no one can come in and either manufacture or sell and take over. Now, if you're in a sophisticated industry where you're developing a complex product and you feel like after 1 year, you still haven't reached that point where you're confident that this is the final product that you want to protect, you can file for what is known as a PCT, which stands for Patent non-proliferation treaty. And this is an 8-month umbrella protection that covers you globally
Mm-hmm.
until you figure out exactly which regions you want to file for.
Okay.
So it gives you an additional 18 months of runway. That's one way to think about it until you realize where your regional patents will go.
It's overwhelming. Like it's just every topic we talked about, the patents, the VCs, the accelerators. It's just an overwhelming experience. I think, especially to the people listening, it's very detailed. You go like in each phase of like the startup life. It's very dense. It's not just shallow. Like you go talk to them and that's it. No, every step has like multiple steps within to help make the successful supported, safe, and just good to go to market without any troubles later on. So you have to from that industry. I think there's a lot of long time thinking. You just have to create an MVP, which is a mean viable product, and then you keep improving on it as much as possible within a specific time frame to meet the specifications that the market needs. So yeah, it's very crazy. We're coming. Mm-hmm.
I was just going to build up slightly on
Yeah.
what you were just saying. It's important to think about the entire roadmap. So if you're looking at what the next 5 years would look like for you, it's really good to plan it out and map it out and figure out what resources you need, the timelines that's going to go into every single piece of your startup journey. Don't just start working right away. A lot of people might get excited about the idea and get excited about the journey without really trying to put together a proper plan, figuring out what your customers need, what your market looks like, figuring out what the competition looks like. You really need to understand all of these pieces of your business before you start executing on it. And strategy plays a really big role in the success or fail of any business, not just business.
Would you say, in your opinion, the more risk you have, the more planning you need to do prior to actually launching your product into the market? Like, let's say, because now we have like the two different types of project management, the waterfall methodology and then the agile methodology, where the agile says, okay, don't spend too much time on planning, just create an MVP and then keep building on that MVP until you reach the final best product. But then the old method of like waterfall tells us to, okay, do all 180% planning and then only 20% execution, for example. Just spend a lot of time planning, make sure everything is good, and then execute. So in your opinion, in the new startup world, in your industry, how do you set it up? Like, how do you balance that out?
As you said, balance is very important, and you have to be able to strike that proper balance, because if you're a startup, you're limited on resources, you're limited on time. There are bigger players in the market who can take you over at any time. So you need to be able to move fast. If you're moving fast, that's why the minimum viable product comes into play. You don't have to develop your entire product right away. You actually develop something that you can work with in the short run, while being able to explain what your business is going to look like in the future. And that's where IP comes into play, to protect your technology, to protect what you're trying to do. But being nimble as a startup is very important, because you don't want to get stuck in the whole corporate methodology of trying to get a new product out to market, which can take years, and they can afford to do that. You as a startup, you just can't.
Yeah. That's crazy. We came to the final section of the main business topics today, which is something I've been wanting to ask you all along. It's the pitching section, or how to do your sales pitch, how to go out there and talk about your product, talk about your company in order to get that funding. It's like a very important part. You have to be successful in that phase in order to actually get the funding, going to the accelerators it's like a building block, an initial building block. But I wanted to keep it to last because it just very Amr specific. I've heard a lot of things about your pitching skills. So Amr is actually an enacted Student Entrepreneur of the Year in 2017. He's a TEDx speaker. And then in 2019, he won the Entrepreneurship World Cup in Saudi Arabia, which is crazy. So talk to us about pitching experience, how you actually plan, what do you look at, and how are you perceived when you go on that stage and you pitch? You have that 5 minutes, 3 minute pitch, such a short time, but you need to have a big impact on the investors sitting in front of you.
Yep. I think one thing you need to focus on is, well, it's not one thing, it's a few things. One thing, but to start off, the first thing is that you need to understand who your audience is. Don't just go in and try to think that every single pitch is going to work on every single audience member. So if you're pitching to investors, it's going to be different than pitching to physicians. It's going to be different than pitching to your own family who's trying to understand what you're working on. So make sure you deliver something that can be understood from anywhere from a 5-year-old up to a 75-year-old and everything in between, essentially.
Yeah.
The next thing that you want to focus on is to build a story. I think, especially investors, they've heard tons of startup pitches, and every single time they hear the same exact thing: a problem, a solution. How am I going to make you money? But what we don't really know is that a lot of these investors are people at the end of the day, and they want to work with people. They don't just want to work with someone who's going to make them a ton of money, and that's about it. They want to make sure that the person that they're working with is another person that they're comfortable working with, that they feel is genuine, which is something that will come out in your pitch. If you're just trying to deliver a pitch for the sake of raising money, it's going to be seen right off the bat. You have to be really genuine, show your passion, show what you're working on, and really understand what your vision is, because that's what really matters at the end of the day for every single investor. And when it comes to these pitch competitions, once again, you're competing with tens of other startups that are probably as good as you, if not even better. So you have to understand how you're going to stand out. And at this point, practice makes perfect. What I knew is that maybe I'm good at delivering those pitches, but I'm never going to be good, and I never was good if I didn't practice enough. So understand what you're trying to deliver and practice on that really, really well, and try not to deliver a script. Don't make it seem as if you went out and you memorized something and you're just delivering it to get through your 3 or 5 minutes. Go through a story. Make people feel like you're telling them a story. That's what people are always excited to hear, and always try to relate it to them. Try to relate it to someone who could be in the audience. That way you capture their attention right off the bat. They always say the first 10 seconds is probably that period of time when you're either going to capture someone's attention or you're going to lose them for the next 3 to 5 minutes. So focus on the first 10 seconds, end strong, begin strong.
It's crazy how everything is very technical like that, and you have to keep in your mind that everyone is different. It reminded me of like when we're applying to different internships or just jobs, when they say don't keep the same resume or CV in every single job when you apply. Change it up. Make sure that everyone thinks differently. Everyone wants to see something that's different. So like at least change the headline and then keep the body. Just get their attention at the beginning and keep going. To summarize what Amr said in a couple of words, he talked about just setting it up. He put an emphasis on being genuine and putting your emotion in what you're talking about. He said, don't necessarily memorize, but practice, which is different. Just practice to be upfront, practice to put your personality and the company's ethos or background, like force into your speaking. Let the people hear you. Let the people feel what you're all about, and then go and deliver something that's understood by everyone. From, as he said, from a 5-year-old to a 75-year-old, because everyone perceives information differently. So don't necessarily go and talk super technical, because most investors might not be in the healthcare industry, so they won't understand. Actually, understand your audience, understand your stakeholders, who's listening to you. You could even go in and research, my audience is all engineers, my audience is all healthcare, so I might go into detail a little bit more to make them feel that I understand the field itself and what they're all about. So keep it in mind, but genuinity is, I think, if that's a word, is the number one thing to take care of.
I agree 100%.
We came to the one of my favorite sections. It's a minute-long section where we have the fire questions. The fire questions are basically just talking about yourself or about the healthcare or the entrepreneurship world in general. So we have 5 questions, a minute in a word or a sentence. All right, let's go.
Let's do it.
So, what's your favorite quote?
That's my favorite quote. Oh God. uh, I can't remember exactly what the quote says,
Mhm.
but essentially what it means is that it's great what people and an entity can achieve if no one wants to take the credit.
Okay. What's if you look at at an entrepreneur, what are 3 traits or 3 words you would describe him of?
Passion, grit, and being genuine.
You're in your 20s right now. If you look at the teenage Amr, what would you tell him? If you're able to go back in time and talk to him,
I would have told myself to start.
can you repeat that one?
I would have told myself to start a business much earlier.
Really? So how early?
So I started when I was 20, 21. I probably would have wanted to start something in my teenage high school years.
All right. And the final question of today is, what is the most important thing about being in the healthcare and this industry in general?
Being patient is very important because it's going to take a long time to get your solution out to market. And you're going to face a lot of pushback. So you have to wait out, listen to what people are actually telling you, and being able to deliver on it despite so many obstacles and hurdles along the way is not going to be an easy thing.
Yeah.
So be patient and use your passion to fuel you to the next step.
That ends our quick questions or 5 questions section. Our final part today is the ending remarks. I just love that every guest that comes on just gives a little bit of his experience through some advice to the business enthusiasts, to the young entrepreneurs, to the people that want to move forward and want to become more successful, uh, not only in the Middle East and North Africa region, but in general, and whoever is going to listen to us from all over the world. So, what advice would you give those people to tell them, be patient, as you said, keep moving forward? How would you describe your advice? How would you portray it?
Well, advice can obviously be given to different people depending on their needs. But generally, what every entrepreneur wants to listen to and make sure that they really understand this from the get go is that it's going to be difficult. There's never going to be a
Mhm.
time where you're not going to feel like you're about to fail, everything's falling apart.
Yeah.
This is going to happen. And it's as they say, and it's going to be a roller coaster ride. There's
Yeah.
going to be the ups, there's going to be the downs. Accept it, and move on. You're going
What
to hear
doesn't
so
kill you
many
makes you
no's.
stronger. If you portray it in different words.
That's true. And you're going to hear so many no's.
Hmm.
Don't always think that these no's are maybe something that is telling you to quit. No, take in the feedback, actually listen to it, and see how you can change that feedback into something that will work for you. And at some point, you might actually hear enough no's that
Yeah.
at this point you need to realize that this is something that won't work, and you need to move on to something else. Don't let it discourage you from moving
Hmm.
on to something else. Use what you've learned and the feedback that you've gained and all the knowledge that you've collected and the network that you have to
Hmm.
build the next thing. Don't ever stop.
You reminded me of when I was in my swimming career back in the day. Uh, I used to get a lot of injuries in my shoulder, okay, in my shoulders in general. As I used to swim butterfly, so I used to swim a 200 fly as well, which is like a long race in this, a hard race in the swimming world. I had a very strong injury. The therapist, whoever was like the doctor I was with, he said, you need to stop swimming. Like literally, when I was like, let's say 14 or 15, he said, Samir, I don't think you can move forward with swimming. You need to stop, and your shoulder's just gonna keep getting worse and worse. Uh, a month after, like I stopped swimming for like 6 months because of my injury. A month after that, I remember exactly. I went and won the national championship in Egypt for my race. I went and won, and then another friend of mine, was injured, and she went back to the doctor and said he asked about me, and she told him, "Oh, you told him he can't swim, but he actually just won the national championship right now." So like, don't look at when people say negative things. When people say no, don't take that as a negative gesture. Just actually go out there, and it's not the end of the world. It's just
Yeah.
his own opinion. Not everyone has the same opinion. Just go out there, do your best, and you'll see results when it's least expected.
And building off what you just said, like it's important to know who you are,
Mm-hmm.
know what you're capable of, and know your limitations as well.
Yeah.
Yes, be safe. Don't do something stupid. If a doctor tells you that this is not safe
Yeah.
for you, don't do it. But at the same time, don't let anyone tell you that you can't do something. You know what you're capable of, and
Mm-hmm.
use your own knowledge and capabilities and limitations to your advantage.
Amr, it's been a pleasure. I'm so happy to have had you on Business Pharaohs today. You're a pharaoh in the Canadian land, which is something I like. I'm the same way. I love the sense of community you guys have in NERv, the sense of growth, the sense of family in general that you have built together, which keeps you actually moving forward. I've seen it. I love it. I've always wanted to be part of it and get to know you guys a little bit more. I'm pretty sure after what you've been talking about, that the people listening will feel that sense of community and friendship within how you spoke about the company, within how you spoke about the hardships you guys face together. So keep moving forward, keep being great, and I have to say that, but keep waving the Egyptian flag and the Arab flag all over the world.
I'll do that. I'll do that. Thank you so much for having me. Like, it's a pleasure being on your podcast, and it's been a pleasure knowing you as well. And I must say that I really like the phrase "pharaoh" in the Canadian land. I think I'm going to use that moving forward. But above all, I'm definitely proud to be an Egyptian, proud to be an Arab, and hopefully I can use that representation and show a better image of Egyptians and Arabs.
That's great. I'll be watching out.
Thank you so much.
See you.